My name is Ali, and I'm 32 years old. I own 2 successful restaurants in Chicago, but my dad still treats me like I'm a disappointment. We haven't had a real relationship since my parents divorced 10 years ago. When I heard he was throwing Mom a surprise 60th birthday party, I wasn't shocked to learn I wasn't invited. Dad claimed he didn't want drama at his perfect party, but Mom deserved to have her whole family there. So I showed up anyway. The real shock came when my sister Jessica's new boyfriend saw me walk in, smiled, and said, "Hi, boss." Let me tell you what happened next. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from, hit like, and subscribe to hear more family drama stories like mine. Growing up in our middle-class suburban home in Illinois, my relationship with my father was everything a little girl could dream of. Dad was my hero. He took me fishing on Saturday mornings, cheered the loudest at my softball games, and most importantly, taught me how to cook. Some of my warmest childhood memories are standing on a stool in our kitchen, watching Dad prepare his famous lasagna or grill the perfect steak. "Cooking is about patience and passion, alley cat," he'd say, letting me stir the sauce or season the meat. You can taste when someone cooks with love. Those kitchen lessons planted the seeds for what would become my life's passion. Every weekend, we'd try new recipes together, experimenting with flavors and techniques we'd seen on cooking shows. Mom, a dedicated elementary school teacher, would smile as she walked into the kitchen to find us covered in flour or debating the perfect amount of garlic. Our family dinners were sacred. No phones, no television, just conversation about our day while enjoying whatever creation Dad and I had made. During holidays, our kitchen became command central, with relatives popping in to steal samples, while Dad and I orchestrated elaborate feasts. My sister Jessica, 4 years younger than me, preferred reading books to cooking. She was always the quiet one, the peacemaker, the one who could smooth over any disagreement with her gentle smile and reasonable suggestions. While I inherited Dad's passion and sometimes his temper, Jessica got Mum's patience and diplomatic nature. You two balance each other perfectly. Mum would say, watching Jessica mediate one of my arguments with Dad. Things started to change when I entered my teenage years. Dad, who worked his way up from loan officer to regional manager at Illinois First Bank, had always emphasized education and financial security. He began talking about college, steering me toward business programs and practical careers. "Banking might not seem exciting, Ali, but it's stable. It provides for a family," he'd lecture during our now less frequent cooking sessions. When I mentioned culinary school in junior year, the first major crack appeared in our relationship. We were making Sunday dinner, and I casually mentioned that Chef Thompson from Le Petit Bistro had suggested I apply to the Culinary Institute after graduation. Dad's knife stopped mid-chop. "That's a nice hobby, but it's not a real career plan." "It's not a hobby," I argued. "I want to be a chef, maybe own my own restaurant someday." "Do you have any idea how many restaurants fail? How many chefs work themselves to death for minimum wage?" His voice rose with each question. "We've been saving for your education so you can have a stable future, not chase some Food Network fantasy." The argument escalated until Mom intervened, suggesting we all cool down and discuss options rationally. But something had shifted. Dad started bringing home brochures for business programs, leaving them strategically on my desk or at my place at the dinner table. When senior year came and application deadlines approached, the tension reached a breaking point. I'd applied to 3 business schools to appease my parents, but my heart was set on the Culinary Institute of America. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday, and I couldn't contain my excitement. That night at dinner, I placed the envelope next to Dad's plate. "What's this?" he asked, putting down his fork. "I got in," I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. "Full acceptance with a partial scholarship." Mum immediately congratulated me, but Dad just stared at the letter. "We agreed you'd go to business school first. Get a degree that means something." "No, you agreed. This is what I want to do with my life." The argument that followed was the worst we'd ever had. Dad called me ungrateful, impulsive, unrealistic. I called him controlling and unsupportive. Mum and Jessica tried to mediate, but the damage was done. Eventually, after weeks of cold silence and Mum's gentle persuasion, Dad agreed to a compromise. He would support my culinary education under strict conditions. I had to maintain a 3.8 GPA, work part-time, to contribute to expenses and take business management electives alongside my culinary classes. "If you're going to throw away a proper education, you'll at least learn how businesses actually work," he said, his tone making it clear he expected me to fail. I agreed to his terms, but something fundamental had changed in our relationship. The easy companionship of our cooking sessions was replaced by a chilly politeness. My childhood hero had become my first real opponent, and I was determined to prove him wrong. The day I left for culinary school was bittersweet. Mum and Jessica helped me pack, filling my car with carefully labelled boxes and tearful hugs. Dad stood in the driveway offering mechanical advice about tyre pressure and gas mileage, instead of the emotional goodbye I secretly hoped for. "Your first tuition payment is in your account," he said stiffly, handing me an envelope with emergency contact information. "Remember our agreement?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I will." Culinary school was everything I'd dreamed of, and more difficult than I'd imagined. The instructors were demanding, the hours brutal, and the competition fierce. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. I thrived under pressure, absorbing techniques like a sponge, staying late to perfect my knife skills, and arriving early to practice bread recipes. I called home weekly, excitedly sharing my progress with Mum and Jessica. Dad would briefly come on the line asking about my business classes rather than my culinary achievements. I sent pictures of my most successful dishes, report cards showing my perfect GPA, even a letter from my advanced techniques professor praising my work ethic and creativity. True to his word, Dad paid my tuition for the first year. Then during spring break, he sat me down in his home office. "Your grades are acceptable," he said, reviewing my midterm reports. "But I'm concerned about the practical aspects of your education." "What do you mean I'm at the top of my class?" "In cooking, yes, but your business management professor says you're doing the minimum, that you seem disinterested in the financial aspects of running a restaurant." I was stunned. "I maintain an A in that class too. What more do you want?" "I want you to take this seriously, to understand that passion doesn't pay bills." He slid a folder across the desk. "I've decided to modify our arrangement. I'll cover half your tuition for sophomore year. You'll need to work or take loans for the rest." "That wasn't our deal," I protested, feeling betrayed. "Consider it a real-world business lesson," he replied coldly. "Circumstances change. Successful people adapt." I left that meeting determined to succeed without his full support. I picked up additional shifts at the local restaurant where I worked weekends, took out a small student loan, and applied for every culinary scholarship available. Sleep became a luxury as I balanced work, school, and the additional applications. By junior year, I was covering my entire tuition through a combination of prestigious scholarships, part-time work, and loans. Dad seemed almost disappointed when I called home with the news that I didn't need his financial help anymore. During those grueling years, I found an unexpected mentor in Chef Marcus Alvarez, the notoriously demanding instructor of our Advanced Culinary Techniques course. Where other students wilted under his criticism, I thrived, seeing each correction as an opportunity to improve. "You have something special, Allie," he told me after class one evening when I'd stayed late to perfect a complicated sauce reduction. "Not just skill, but hunger. You cook like someone with something to prove." "Maybe I do," I admitted. He nodded thoughtfully. "Just make sure you know who you're trying to prove it to. Cook for yourself first." After graduation, Chef Marcus recommended me for a line cook position at Aurelia, one of Chicago's most prestigious restaurants. The executive chef, Daniel Crane, had a reputation for brilliance and brutality in equal measure. My first day, he circled my station like a shark, watching as I prepped vegetables. "Too slow," he barked. "And your brunoise is uneven. Do it again." I started over, without complaint, moving faster, making each cube of carrot perfectly uniform. He returned 20 minutes later, examined my work and grunted, "Less terrible. Now do the onions." Working under Chef Crane was like culinary boot camp. Nothing was ever good enough. He threw out dishes I'd spent hours preparing because the plating was uninspired, or the seasoning was 1 grain of salt too much. He called me banking girl after learning about my father suggesting I might be better suited for counting money than creating food. But each criticism, each demolished dish, each 14-hour shift only strengthened my resolve. I absorbed every technique, every flavor combination, every plating strategy. I developed calluses on my hands and a thickness to my skin that no insult could penetrate. After 18 months of this crucible, something unexpected happened. Chef Crane assigned me to develop a special for the weekly menu. My roasted beet salad with whipped goat cheese, candied walnuts, and a balsamic reduction sold out 2 nights in a row. The following week, he moved me to the sauce station, the heart of the kitchen hierarchy. By 24, I was sous chef at Aurelia, the youngest in the restaurant's history. I sent invitations to my family for the small ceremony when I received my promotion. Mum and Jessica came beaming with pride, as Chef Crane actually praised my exceptional palate and irritating perfectionism in a brief speech. Dad had a regional banking conference that couldn't be rescheduled. When I was featured in a local food magazine as one to watch in the Chicago dining scene, I mailed copies to my family. Mum framed the article. Dad sent a brief text. Congratulations. Hope it's sustainable. Each milestone, each achievement came with an invitation to Dad that was politely declined. Each success came with faint praise, followed by cautionary warnings about the restaurant industry's high failure rate. The pattern became so predictable it almost stopped hurting. Almost. While my professional life flourished, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still that teenager desperate for her father's approval. Mum assured me he was proud, in his own way, but his persistent absence from every important moment told a different story. He keeps that magazine article in his desk drawer, Jessica confided during one of our sister brunches. I saw him looking at it when I dropped off some paperwork. Then why can't he just show up just once? I asked, pushing away my plate. Jessica sighed. You know, Dad, he'd have to admit he was wrong about your career, and when has he ever admitted being wrong about anything? I laughed, but it was hollow. The truth was beginning to sink in. My father might never approve of the path I'd chosen, no matter how successful I became. It was a painful realization, but also strangely liberating. If his approval was impossible to earn, maybe I could finally stop trying. By my 29th birthday, I had been saving and planning for my own restaurant for years. Working as executive sous chef at one of Chicago's most acclaimed restaurants had given me invaluable experience and connections, but I was ready to create something that was truly mine. I had a detailed business plan, innovative menu concepts centered around sustainable local ingredients, and my eye on a perfect location in Chicago's West Loop neighborhood. The space was a former warehouse with exposed brick walls, high ceilings, and large windows that flooded the room with natural light. The moment I walked in, I could visualize every detail. The open kitchen where diners could watch their meals being prepared, the custom wooden tables made from reclaimed barnwood, the living wall of herbs that would provide fresh garnishes and infuse the space with their aroma. I named it Harvest Table, a place where food would tell the story of its journey from farm to plate. My vision was clear. My plan was solid and my savings account was respectable, but not nearly enough for what I needed. It was time to approach banks for a business loan. I put on my most professional outfit, polished my business plan until it shone, and began making appointments with loan officers across the city. I was confident. My credit was excellent. I had significant savings for a down payment, and my experience in the industry was impressive. What I didn't count on was the series of rejections that followed. The restaurant industry is extremely volatile, one loan officer explained, not unkindly. Your concept is interesting, but we'd need to see more collateral, said another. Perhaps you should consider starting smaller, like a food truck, suggested a third. After the fifth rejection, a pattern began to emerge in their feedback. They all mentioned the same concerns about my limited business experience and potentially impulsive decision-making. The language was so specific, so similar across different banks that it couldn't be coincidental. The truth hit me during a conversation with Marissa, a college friend who worked in finance. Which banks have you applied to? She asked over coffee, reviewing my latest rejection letter. I listed them, counting on my fingers. First Illinois Lakeside Trust, Midwest Community, Chicago Financial and Regional Savings. Marissa's expression shifted. First Illinois, isn't that where your dad works? Yes, but I applied at a different branch. I didn't want any special treatment, she frowned. Alley banks talk to each other, especially about business loans. And if your dad is a regional manager? The implication hung in the air between us. I refused to believe it at first. Dad and I might have our differences, but would he actually sabotage my dream? That evening, I drove to his house unannounced. It was the first time I'd visited since Mum moved out after the divorce 3 years earlier. The lawn was immaculate as always. The exterior freshly painted, but the flower beds Mum had lovingly tended were gone, replaced by low-maintenance shrubs in perfect symmetry. Dad opened the door in his reading glasses, surprise quickly replaced by wariness. Allie, this is unexpected. We need to talk, I said, stepping past him into the foyer. In his meticulously organized living room, I confronted him directly. Have you been talking to other banks about my loan applications? He removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. I may have had some conversations with colleagues, yes. What exactly did you tell them? The truth, he said flatly. that you make impulsive decisions, that you've never run a business, that your creative temperament isn't well suited to the practical realities of restaurant ownership. Each word landed like a physical blow. You had no right to interfere. I had every right as your father to protect you from making a catastrophic mistake. Do you have any idea how much money you could lose? How many restaurants fail in their first year? I've been planning this for years. I've worked in every position in a restaurant. My business plan was vetted by industry professionals. But none of that matters because you've already decided I'll fail. I'm being realistic. You're being naive. No, I said, my voice shaking with anger. You're being controlling. You couldn't stop me from going to culinary school, so now you're trying to stop me from opening my restaurant. I'm trying to save you from financial ruin. He shouted, his composure finally cracking. You're trying to force me to live the life you wanted for me, I shouted back. But here's the thing, Dad. I don't need your permission anymore, and I don't need your bank's money either. We stood there both breathing hard, decades of hurt and misunderstanding crystallized in that moment. I waited for him to soften, to show some sign of understanding or support. Instead, he straightened his shoulders and said coldly, "When it fails, don't come to me for help." "I would never," I replied, equally cold. "I stopped expecting your help a long time ago." As I turned to leave, Mum called. Dad's phone was on the coffee table, her smiling face lighting up the screen. A painful reminder of the family we once were. I let myself out as he answered her call, wondering if he would tell her about our confrontation, or if this would become another thing we didn't discuss at family gatherings. Mum tried to mediate when she learned what had happened. She invited us both to dinner, hoping to broker some kind of peace. But Dad refused to apologize for what he called professional advice, and I refused to forgive what I saw as a deliberate attempt to sabotage my dream. "He thinks he was protecting you," Mum explained over wine after Dad left early. "By telling banks I'm unreliable, by undermining years of planning," Mum sighed. "Your father has only ever known one path to success, the straight, safe corporate ladder he climbed. Anything else looks like a cliff edge to him." She squeezed my hand. "That doesn't make what he did right. But he really believes he's saving you from disaster." "Well, he's accomplished one thing," I said bitterly. "I'm more determined than ever to succeed." And I was. If traditional bank loans were closed to me, I would find another way. The next morning, I began researching alternative funding options, applying for small business grants, approaching restaurant investors, and exploring crowdfunding platforms. I took on consulting work for new restaurants, designing their menus, and training their kitchen staff for extra income. I sold my car and moved to a smaller apartment to cut expenses. For months, I lived on coffee and determination. Every rejection became fuel for my fire. Every obstacle made me more creative in finding solutions. And slowly, piece by piece, my financing came together. A small business grant here, an angel investor there, and a successful crowdfunding campaign that exceeded my goals. The day I signed the lease on my restaurant space, I didn't call my father. But the absence of his approval still cast a shadow over what should have been an unequivocally joyful moment. I pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the mountain of work ahead. I had a restaurant to build, a staff to hire, and a point to prove. The 6 months leading up to Harvest Table's opening were the most stressful and exhilarating of my life. Every day brought new challenges, construction delays, permit issues, equipment malfunctions, and budget constraints that forced constant creative problem solving. I worked 18-hour days, falling into bed each night with paint in my hair or drywall dust on my clothes, only to wake up at dawn with a fresh list of tasks. Despite the chaos, watching my vision take physical shape was magical. The worn wooden floors were sanded and refinished to a warm honey glow. The exposed brick walls were cleaned and sealed, preserving their industrial character while making them food service appropriate. The custom bar was built from reclaimed oak barrel staves, curving elegantly through the space like a river. Hiring staff was a delicate balance of finding talented people who shared my vision and could work within my limited opening budget. I needed professionals who believed in the concept enough to take a chance on a first-time owner. Ryan came in for the bartender position on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Tall and easygoing with a quiet confidence, he impressed me immediately with his knowledge of craft cocktails and local spirits. "I want to create drinks that complement your farm-to-table concept," he explained, showing me ideas for cocktails using seasonal ingredients and house-made infusions. "When a guest orders a drink with their meal, it should be part of the same story you're telling with the food." "That's exactly what I'm looking for," I said, offering him the job on the spot. "When can you start?" "In Ryan became an invaluable part of the team, arriving early to experiment with new infusions and staying late to help wherever needed. He had a natural talent for customer service, remembering regulars' preferences and making everyone feel welcome. What I didn't know until months later was his connection to my family. Opening night at Harvest Table was both terrifying and triumphant. The restaurant was fully booked, filled with friends, former colleagues, supportive industry people, and curious locals. The kitchen ran smoothly despite the pressure, each plate leaving exactly as I'd envisioned. When I finally had a moment to step out of the kitchen and look around at the buzzing dining room, the warm lighting glinting off glasses of wine, the sound of genuine laughter and conversation, I felt a surge of pride, so intense it brought tears to my eyes. Mum and Jessica were seated at the best table, beaming with pride, as they sampled every dish. Dad's absence was a hollow space I refused to acknowledge. The first months were a roller coaster. Some nights we were slammed, the kitchen pushed to its limits. Others were dishearteningly quiet. Cash flow was tight, and I often paid suppliers before paying myself. But word was spreading. Social media posts of our colourful, artfully plated dishes began circulating. Local food bloggers wrote glowing reviews of our commitment to sourcing and sustainability. Then came the review that changed everything. Meredith Winters, Chicago's most influential food critic, visited unannounced on a busy Friday night. I recognized her immediately when she walked in, her distinctive red hair and discreet note-taking giving her away. The kitchen rose to the occasion, sending out our most perfect execution of each dish. Her review, published the following week, called Harvest Table a revelation, and me a bold new voice in Chicago's culinary conversation. She praised our commitment to local producers, the thoughtful wine list, and the unpretentious warmth of the service. The final paragraph still makes me emotional when I read it. What separates Harvest Table from the crowded field of farm-to-table contenders is the clear vision of its owner, Chef Ali Morgan. Each dish tells a story of place, season, and passion. In a world of corporate restaurant groups and celebrity chef outposts, Morgan has created something authentic and personal. Harvest Table isn't just serving meals, it's serving a philosophy on a plate, and Chicago is lucky to have it. The day after the review published, we had a line outside before opening. Our reservation system crashed from the volume of requests. Within a week, we were booked solid for 2 months. I had to hire additional staff, extend our hours, and still we struggled to keep up with demand. By the end of our first year, Harvest Table had become one of Chicago's most talked about restaurants. We won Best New Restaurant in the City Magazine's annual awards. My innovative approach to seasonal vegetables earned a feature in a national culinary publication. We were profitable ahead of schedule, allowing me to give my hard-working staff the raises they deserved and begin planning for expansion. 2 years after opening, I signed the lease on a second location. The new space was larger, allowing for a more ambitious menu and a private dining area for events. The grand opening was a star-studded affair with local celebrities, media, and influential food world figures in attendance. I sent formal invitations to my family, including Dad. Mum and Jessica came, of course, dressed up and proud, taking selfies by the new living herb wall and chatting with my staff like old friends. Dad sent his regrets via text message, citing a work commitment. Despite my success, or perhaps because of it, the distance between my father and me had only grown. Our interactions at family gatherings were polite but strained, limited to superficial conversations about weather and sports. He never asked about my restaurants, and I never volunteered information. It was as if we'd silently agreed to ignore the most significant part of my life. Jessica tried repeatedly to bridge the gap, inviting us both to dinners or suggesting family outings. Mum, now happily remarried to a kind literature professor, encouraged reconciliation while respecting my boundaries. But the hurt ran too deep, the patterns too established, to break through casual family gatherings. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had achieved everything I'd set out to accomplish. My restaurants were successful beyond my wildest dreams. I had proved every one of my father's dire predictions wrong. But instead of feeling vindicated, I felt an emptiness in the center of my success. The person whose approval I had sought most fiercely was the only one not celebrating with me. On quiet nights after service, alone in my office, counting receipts or planning next season's menu, I sometimes allowed myself to imagine a different reality. One where Dad sat proudly at the bar, chatting with my staff and bragging to strangers about his daughter's restaurant. But those fantasies always dissolved into the harder truth. Success meant something different to each of us, and perhaps those differences were too fundamental to ever reconcile. I was in the middle of a staff meeting when Jessica called. Seeing her name on my phone screen, I excused myself to answer. "Hey Jess, can I call you back in 20? I'm just wrapping up with the team." "Actually, it's kind of important," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone that immediately put me on alert. "It's about Mum's birthday." Mum's 60th birthday was approaching in a few weeks. I'd already ordered a custom cookbook of family recipes I'd professionally tested and photographed, along with reservations at her favorite theater for a weekend in New York. "What about it? Did the theater call you about the tickets?" "No, Dad's planning a surprise party for her, at his house, this Saturday." "That's nice," I said carefully. Mum and Dad had maintained a cordial relationship since their divorce, mainly for Jessica's and my sake. It wasn't shocking that he'd host a party for her milestone birthday, but it was unexpected. He's invited all her friends, some family from out of town, even her book club. It's going to be really special. Jessica's voice had that forced brightness that told me she was working up to something unpleasant. "Sounds great. What time should I be there? I can bring dessert from the restaurant." A long pause. "That's the thing, Allie. Dad he thinks it would be better if you didn't come." The words landed like a slap. "He doesn't want me at Mom's birthday party. He said he wants the day to be perfect for Mom without any tension or drama. You know how you two are around each other." "We're perfectly civil," I protested, aware of the defensive edge in my voice. "We managed Thanksgiving and Christmas without incident." I know, I told him that. But he's insisting this is his event, his house, his rules." Jessica sighed heavily. "I'm so sorry, Allie. I tried to change his mind, but you know how stubborn he is." The familiar hurt calcified into anger. "So I'm banned from my own mother's birthday celebration. That's rich even for him. He says you can do something with Mom separately. He just wants this particular day to go smoothly, and he thinks excluding her daughter will make the day perfect for her." I laughed bitterly. "Unbelievable. I hate being caught in the middle like this," Jessica said, her voice small. My anger deflated slightly. This wasn't her fault. "I know, Jess. I'm not upset with you." We talked a few minutes more about the party details, Jessica promising to keep trying to change Dad's mind, though we both knew it was unlikely. After hanging up, I returned to my staff meeting, but my mind was elsewhere, simmering with indignation and hurt. That evening, I received a text from Dad, his first direct communication in months. "Jessica told you about the party. I think it's best if you and I celebrate with your mother separately to avoid complications. I'm sure you understand this is about making her day special, not about our differences." I stared at the message, my thumbs hovering over the keyboard, as I considered various responses, most of them unprintable. Finally, I settled on, "Mum would want her whole family together for her birthday, but you've made your position clear." He replied almost immediately, "This isn't personal, Allie. I'm just trying to avoid drama." "Not personal. You're excluding your daughter from her mother's milestone birthday. How is that not personal?" I typed back. "You always make everything about you. This day is about your mother, not our issues." I threw my phone across the couch, too angry to respond. How dare he suggest I was the selfish one when he was the one creating this unnecessary division? Mum would be heartbroken if she knew I'd been excluded. Over the next few days, the situation festered in my mind. Mum had been dropping hints recently about missing family gatherings where everyone was present. "It's lovely seeing you and your dad separately," she'd said during our last lunch, "but I miss having my whole family in one room without walking on eggshells." The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that attending the party was the right thing to do, for Mum's sake, not Dad's. When I shared my thoughts with Jessica, she was supportive but nervous. "If you do come, promise me you won't create a scene," she pleaded. "This is Mom's day. I promise. I'll be on my absolute best behaviour. I just want to be there for Mom." Jessica hesitated, then said, "I'll leave the side door unlocked. Come around 7:30 when everyone will be gathered in the living room." The day of the party, I vacillated between determination and doubt. Was I doing the right thing, or was I being stubborn and risking ruining Mom's celebration? I tried calling Jessica for reassurance, but she didn't pick up, probably busy with party preparations. As I dressed in a navy blue cocktail dress that Mum had always complimented, I gave myself a stern pep talk in the mirror. This was about Mum, not Dad, not me, not our ongoing conflict. I would be pleasant and civil, even to Dad. I would focus on making Mum happy. I would rise above petty grievances for one evening. I wrapped Mum's gift carefully, the custom cookbook bound in soft leather with family flavours embossed in gold on the cover. Inside were all our family recipes professionally tested and photographed, including Dad's famous lasagna and Mum's perfect apple pie. It had taken months to compile, test and photograph each dish. It was perfect, a gift that acknowledged our family's past while celebrating Mum's role in it. The drive to Dad's house felt surreal. I hadn't been there for a family gathering since before the divorce. Would the layout be the same? Had he redecorated beyond removing Mum's flower beds? Would her friends be uncomfortable seeing me there against Dad's wishes? As I parked down the street to avoid drawing attention, my phone buzzed with another text from Dad. "I hope you've respected my wishes about tonight. This is important to your mother." I didn't respond. Instead, I sat in my car staring at the house where I'd grown up, now illuminated with string lights for the party. Cars lined the driveway and street. Mum's book club friends, her fellow teachers, relatives from Michigan. Through the front windows, I could see people mingling glasses in hand laughter, occasionally carrying across the lawn. My stomach knotted with anxiety. Maybe Dad was right. Maybe my presence would create tension that would detract from Mom's special day. Maybe I should just leave, send my gift with Jessica later, and arrange a separate celebration as Dad suggested. But then I remembered Mum's words about wanting her whole family together. I thought of all the times Dad had missed my important moments. Graduation, restaurant openings, awards. I thought of how much Mum would light up seeing me walk through that door. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed Mum's gift and my purse and made my decision. I would attend my mother's birthday party, whether my father approved or not. Some things were more important than old grudges, and celebrating my mother's 60 years was definitely one of them. My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached Dad's house, from the side staying close to the hedge that separated his property from the neighbours. The evening air was cool against my flushed skin, the sound of laughter and conversation growing louder as I neared the side entrance Jessica had promised to leave unlocked. I tested the handle gently. True to her word, the door was open. I slipped inside, finding myself in the mudroom that connected to the kitchen. The house smelled of appetizers and the vanilla-scented candles Mum had always favoured. Familiar, yet strange after so much time away. Voices came from the living room around the corner. Dozens of conversations overlapping, punctuated by laughter. I recognised Mum's distinctive chuckle, the sound sending a wave of both longing and determination through me. I was doing the right thing. She would want me here. I adjusted my dress, checked my reflection in the small decorative mirror by the coat hooks, and took a steadying breath. With Mum's gift tucked under my arm, I stepped into the kitchen. Two of Mum's book club friends were by the counter filling a water pitcher. They spotted me and smiled in recognition, but before they could greet me, I pressed a finger to my lips, pointing toward the living room with a conspiratorial smile. They nodded, understanding I was part of the surprise. I paused at the entrance to the living room, taking in the scene. The space was filled with familiar faces. Mum's colleagues from school, neighbours from her condo complex, relatives from both sides of the family. In the centre of it all stood Mum, radiant in a blue dress that matched her eyes, laughing at something Jessica was saying. Dad stood nearby, playing the gracious host refreshing drinks and accepting compliments on the spread of food that covered the dining room table. He looked older than I remembered, the silver in his hair, more pronounced, but still commanding in his perfectly pressed shirt and slacks. Jessica spotted me first, her eyes widening slightly before she controlled her expression. She gave a tiny nod, then subtly angled herself so that Mum's back was to me, allowing me to enter without being immediately seen. I took 2 steps into the room when Ryan, who was standing near the fireplace with a drink in hand, looked up and saw me. A flash of surprise crossed his face, followed by a wide, genuine smile. "Hi, boss," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the momentary lull in conversation. The room went silent. Every head turned toward me, including Mom's and Dad's. Mom's face lit up with shock and joy. Dad's expression went from confusion to recognition to barely controlled anger in the span of seconds. "Allie," Mum exclaimed, rushing toward me with open arms. What a wonderful surprise. I embraced her breathing in her familiar perfume, feeling the tension in my shoulders release slightly at her obvious delight. "Happy birthday, Mom," I said, handing her the gift. "I wouldn't miss it for anything." "I'm so happy you're here," she whispered, squeezing me tighter before pulling back to look at me. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." Over Mom's shoulder, I met Dad's gaze. His jaw was tight, his eyes cold. He placed his drink on a side table and began moving purposefully in our direction. The party guests, sensing the undercurrent of tension, resumed their conversations with forced enthusiasm, studiously avoiding looking directly at the unfolding family drama. "Allie," Dad said stiffly when he reached us. "What a surprise." The words were polite, but his tone was arctic. "Dad," I replied with equal formality, "it's a lovely party. You've done a wonderful job." "Elizabeth," he said to Mum, "why don't you open Ali's gift? Everyone is waiting." It was a transparent attempt to move Mum away from me, but she was too happy to notice the manipulation. "Yes, of course. Everyone look who's here. My daughter Ali made it after all." As Mum moved toward the centre of the room with her gift, Dad took my elbow in a firm grip, steering me toward the kitchen. "A word," he said quietly, his smile never reaching his eyes. Once in the kitchen, safely out of Mum's earshot, he dropped all pretense of civility. "I explicitly asked you not to come," he hissed, his voice low and tight with anger. "And I explicitly decided that Mum deserves to have her whole family present on her birthday," I replied evenly. "This is my house, Ali, my event. You had no right to disregard my wishes. Did you see Mum's face when she saw me? That's all the right I needed." "You never change," he said, shaking his head in disgust. "Always doing exactly what you want without considering the consequences for anyone else." "That's rich coming from you," I shot back, my composure slipping. "When have you ever considered what I want? What would make me happy? You didn't support my education, my career, or my business. You actively tried to sabotage my loan applications. And now you want to ban me from my own mother's birthday party? No. I'm done letting you dictate my relationship with Mom." "I was protecting you," he insisted, color rising in his cheeks. "Every decision I made was to protect you from yourself." "I didn't need protection, Dad. I needed support. I needed you to believe in me." The words came out more vulnerable than I intended, years of hurt bubbling to the surface. "What's going on?" Jessica appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face tense with worry. "Mom's opening presents and wondering where you both are." "Nothing," Dad said curtly. "Just clearing up a misunderstanding." "It doesn't look like nothing," Jessica countered, stepping fully into the kitchen. "It looks like you're fighting at Mom's birthday party, which is exactly what you both promised wouldn't happen." Ryan appeared behind Jessica, his expression concerned. "Everything okay in here?" "Fine," Dad and I said simultaneously, then glared at each other. "Actually," Ryan said, looking uncomfortably between us, "I feel like I should probably explain something." "Now isn't the time," Jessica murmured, tugging at his arm. "No, I think it is," Ryan insisted gently, then turned to my father. "Mr. Morgan, I should have mentioned this earlier, but I work at Ali's restaurant. I've been the bar manager at Harvest Table for about 6 months now." Dad's expression froze. "You work for Ali?" "Yes, sir. That's how I met Jessica, actually. She came in for dinner one night when Ali was in the kitchen." I stared at Ryan in confusion. "Why wouldn't you tell me Jessica is your sister?" "I tried a couple times," he admitted, "but it never seemed like the right moment. And then Jessica asked me not to mention it because of the family situation." "What family situation?" Mum asked, appearing in the doorway behind them, my cookbook clutched to her chest. "Why is everyone in the kitchen instead of enjoying the party?" An awkward silence fell. Jessica looked at the floor. Ryan shifted his weight uncomfortably. Dad and I avoided each other's eyes. "There's something else you should know, Mr. Morgan," Ryan said, finally breaking the tension. "This isn't the first time you've been to Harvest Table." Dad's head snapped up, his expression a mixture of alarm and confusion. "What are you talking about? I've never been to Ali's restaurant." "Actually, you have. 3 times in the past 4 months." Ryan looked apologetic but determined. "You come in alone, always sit at the corner of the bar and order the same thing, the braised short ribs with Parmesan polenta. You always pay in cash and leave before dessert." I felt like the floor had tilted beneath me. "Dad, is this true?" Dad's face had gone pale, his expression unreadable. "I don't know what he's talking about," he said, but the denial lacked conviction. "The first time I didn't know who you were," Ryan continued. "But after I started dating Jessica and saw your photo at her place, I realized. You always come on Tuesday nights when Ali's in the kitchen, but rarely comes out to the dining room. Why would you do that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you secretly eat at my restaurant but refuse to acknowledge my success to my face?" Dad looked cornered, his eyes darting around the kitchen as if seeking escape. "I was curious," he admitted finally. "I wanted to see what you'd created." And the question hung between us, weighted with years of seeking his approval. "The food is excellent," he said stiffly, as if the admission was being pulled from him against his will. "The restaurant is impressive." "Then why continue this charade? Why not just tell me you've been there? That you approve?" Dad ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I remembered from childhood. "Because admitting you were right means admitting I was wrong. About culinary school, about your career path, about everything." And heaven forbid Robert Morgan ever admits he's wrong about anything. Mum said, her voice gentler than her words. That's not fair, Elizabeth, Dad protested. Isn't it? Mum stepped fully into the kitchen, closing the door behind her to shield the conversation from party guests. Robert, you've been visiting your daughter's restaurant in secret because you're too proud to acknowledge that her choices were valid. That's not fair to Allie, and it's not fair to yourself. Dad's shoulders sagged, the fight seeming to drain out of him. For the first time, I saw him not as my intimidating father, but as a man struggling with his own rigidity, his own fear. I was trying to protect you, he said quietly, looking at me directly. The restaurant industry is brutal. The failure rate is astronomical. I've seen so many small businesses collapse, taking their owners' life savings with them. I couldn't bear to watch that happen to you. But it didn't happen, Kai, I pointed out. I succeeded. Despite your doubts, despite your interference with my loans, I built exactly what I set out to build. Yes, he admitted, you did, and it's exceptional. The compliment so long withheld felt surreal, but I still stand by my concern about how you got there. The risks you took were reckless. They were calculated risks based on experience and planning, I countered, and they were mine to take. My life, my choices, my consequences. I understand that now, he sighed heavily. Or I'm trying to. Mum touched his arm gently. Robert, this rift between you and Allie has gone on long enough. You're both stubborn, both convinced you're right, but life is too short for this kind of pride. Trust me on that. Her voice carried the weight of her own life experience, her own regrets. Dad looked at her for a long moment, then back at me. Something shifted in his expression. Not a complete surrender, but perhaps the first crack in a wall that had stood between us for too long. Your short rib dish, he said finally. It reminds me of the one we used to make together when you were little, but you've improved it. The red wine reduction is perfect. It wasn't quite an apology, but from my father, it was monumental. An acknowledgement not just of my success, but of my growth beyond what he had taught me. A recognition that the student had become the master in her chosen field. Thank you, I said simply, unwilling to break the fragile moment with too many words. Now, Mum said firmly, taking each of us by the arm. My birthday party is happening without the birthday girl, and that simply won't do. Whatever else needs to be said can wait until tomorrow. Tonight we celebrate as a family. All of us. She looked pointedly between Dad and me. Of course, Dad said, straightening his shoulders and finding his composure. It's your night, Elizabeth. I nodded in agreement, though my mind was still reeling from the revelations of the past few minutes. As we prepared to rejoin the party, Dad paused his hand on the kitchen door. Allie, he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear, we should talk. Properly. After the party, it wasn't much, but it was a beginning. A door opening after years of standing locked and barred between us. I nodded, feeling the weight of possibility in the gesture. I'd like that, I replied, and meant it. The remainder of Mom's birthday party passed in a surreal blur. We rejoined the guests, Dad resuming his host duties with renewed enthusiasm, Mom glowing with happiness at having her complete family present, and me attempting to process the evening's revelations while making small talk with relatives and family friends. You made that beautiful cookbook, Mum's friend Diane asked, admiring the gift that Mum proudly showed to everyone. The photographs are professional quality. I worked with a food photographer from the magazine that featured the restaurant, I explained. We spent weekends recreating all our old family recipes. Even your father's lasagna, Mum pointed out, showing Diane the page. It looks exactly like he used to make it. Dad, overhearing as he refreshed drinks nearby, paused. You remembered all the steps, the overnight rest for the sauce. Of course, I replied. Some things you don't forget. A small smile touched his lips. I'd like to try your version sometime. See if you've improved that recipe too. It was a tentative olive branch offered in the safety of a public gathering where neither of us could say too much. I accepted it with equal caution. Anytime. Just let me know when. The party wound down around midnight guests, gradually departing with hugs for Mum and compliments to Dad on a wonderful evening. Jessica and Ryan stayed to help with cleanup, creating a strange family tableau in the kitchen as the four of us moved around each other, storing leftovers and loading the dishwasher. This was the best birthday, Mum declared, slipping off her shoes and sinking onto a kitchen stool. Having both my girls here, and you too, Robert, it was perfect. Dad nodded, his expression softer than I'd seen it in years. It was good to have everyone together. As Jessica and Ryan left, promising to return the next day to help with the final cleanup, an awkward silence fell over the kitchen. Mum yawned deliberately. "Well, I should be getting home. It's late," she said, gathering her purse and the stack of birthday cards. "Robert, thank you for a wonderful party. Allie, thank you for coming, sweetheart. And for this incredible cookbook. I'll treasure it always." She hugged us both, then paused at the door, looking back with a knowing expression. "Don't stay up too late talking, but do talk." With that parting instruction, she left the sound of her car starting in the driveway, breaking the silence between us. "Coffee," Dad offered after a moment. "I have decaf." "That would be nice," I agreed. He moved around the kitchen with familiar efficiency, grinding beans, preparing the French press, just as he always had. I sat at the kitchen island watching him work, struck by how much and how little had changed in this space. The appliances were newer, the countertops different, but the methodical way he prepared coffee remained exactly the same. "So," he said as he placed a steaming mug before me, "you've done well for yourself. 2 successful restaurants in under 3 years. That's impressive by any standard." "Thank you," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it." Ryan seems like a good kid, smart, reliable. He is one of my best employees, though apparently I didn't know as much about him as I thought. Dad smiled slightly. "Jessica has good taste, like her mother." We sipped our coffee in silence for a moment, decades of unspoken feelings and grievances hovering between us. "Why didn't you just come to the restaurant properly?" I asked finally. "Why the secrecy?" Dad set his mug down carefully. "Pride, I suppose, and fear." "And fear of what?" "That I'd been completely wrong. That you'd succeeded brilliantly without my help or guidance. That you didn't need me at all." His voice grew quieter. "And maybe that you wouldn't want me there even if I did come. I sent you invitations to every opening, every event. I know, I kept them all." He looked down at his coffee. "The first time I came to Harvest Table, I didn't plan it. I was in the neighborhood for a meeting, saw the sign, and just went in. I told myself it was curiosity, but when I tasted your food..." He paused, searching for words. "It was like I could taste your passion in every bite. Everything I'd dismissed as impractical idealism was right there on the plate, proving me wrong." "So you kept coming back?" He nodded. "I meant to identify myself to tell you I'd been there, but the longer I waited, the harder it became. How do you tell your daughter you've been secretly eating at her restaurant because you're too stubborn to admit she was right?" "You just say it," I said simply. "Like you're doing now." Dad smiled ruefully. "I've never been good at admitting mistakes. Your mother would confirm that." "It's not too late to learn," I suggested, surprising myself with the absence of bitterness in my voice. "No, I suppose it isn't." He took a deep breath. "I was wrong, Allie. About culinary school, about the restaurant, about all of it. I was wrong to try to control your path instead of supporting your choices. And I'm sorry for the hurt that caused." The apology, so long awaited, washed over me like a wave. I blinked back unexpected tears. "Thank you for saying that. I was trying to protect you from disappointment, from failure. But I realize now I was really protecting myself, from the fear of watching you take risks I didn't understand." He reached across the island, his hand stopping just short of mine. "You've created something remarkable, Allie. Something uniquely yours. I should have been there to see it happen." "You can see it now," I offered. "Properly this time. Front door reservation, the whole experience." "I'd like that." He hesitated. "Maybe we could start with dinner, just the 2 of us. A chance to really talk without an audience." "I'd like that too," I said, surprised to find I meant it. The anger and hurt weren't gone, but they had shifted, making room for something new. The possibility of understanding, of rebuilding on different terms. The weeks following Mom's birthday party brought cautious but genuine steps toward reconciliation. Dad made a proper reservation at Harvest Table, arriving on time and introducing himself to the host as Allie's father. I seated him at the chef's table with a view of the kitchen, preparing a special tasting menu that showcased my culinary journey, starting with a refined version of the simple pasta we used to cook together, and ending with an innovative dessert that represented where my creativity had taken me. He asked questions about each dish, listening attentively to my explanations of techniques and ingredient choices. For the first time in my adult life, I felt him truly seeing me, not as the daughter who had defied his plans, but as a professional in my own right, worthy of respect. "I understand now why you chose this path," he said, as we shared coffee after the meal. "Watching you in that kitchen, directing your team, creating those dishes, it's clearly where you belong." "It is," I agreed. "I've never doubted that, even when things were hardest." "Your determination reminds me of myself at your age," he admitted with a small smile. Though I applied mine to spreadsheets rather than soufflés, the comment surprised a laugh from me. Maybe we're not so different after all. Our relationship began to rebuild on this new foundation of mutual respect. It wasn't always smooth. We both had stubborn streaks and strong opinions that occasionally clashed. But the fundamental dynamic had shifted. We were finding our way toward being adults who chose to be in each other's lives rather than parent and child locked in old patterns. A month after our dinner, Dad surprised me by offering business advice when I mentioned expanding to a third location. Rather than cautioning against growth, he asked thoughtful questions about cash flow, lease terms, and staffing plans. When I showed him my financial projections, he reviewed them with professional attention, suggesting a few adjustments that actually strengthened my proposal. "You've become quite the businesswoman," he observed. "All those business electives paid off after all." "They did," I acknowledged, though I'd never have admitted that at 20. "And I'd never have admitted that your culinary education was worth every penny." We were both a bit rigid in our positions. "A Morgan family trait," I suggested with a smile. The healing extended beyond just Dad and me. Family gatherings became easier, more genuine. Mum remarked on the change during a Sunday brunch at my apartment. "It does my heart good to see you two finding your way back to each other," she said, watching as Dad and I debated the merits of different olive oils for a salad dressing. "I always knew you would eventually. You're too important to each other to stay estranged forever." Jessica and Ryan announced their engagement that spring, bringing another layer of connection to our evolving family dynamic. Ryan continued managing the bar at my original restaurant, proving himself invaluable both professionally and as a bridge between different parts of my life. There were still moments when old hurts surfaced, when a careless word or forgotten invitation reopened barely healed wounds. There were still days when Dad's practical caution clashed with my creative risk-taking, but we were learning slowly and imperfectly how to disagree without disconnecting, how to accept our differences without trying to change each other. The most profound lesson I've learned through this journey is that forgiveness doesn't mean erasing the past or pretending the hurt never happened. It means creating space for a new future despite that history. It means choosing connection over being right. Sometimes the relationships that matter most are the ones that require the most work, the most patience, the most willingness to begin again after disappointment. And sometimes love needs to be rebuilt on new foundations of mutual respect and understanding. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship that seemed beyond repair? What helped you find your way back to connection? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that estrangement doesn't have to be permanent. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that it's never too late to take the first step toward healing a broken relationship.